Hi everyone, welcome to the WG's podcast. So this is me, French OG at French OG3 on X, and I have the pleasure to introduce you to Chase from Girls Chase from X. What is your handle?
It's just Girls Chase, one word, on X.
All right. So I've had the pleasure of interacting with Chase, who always contribute to some of my feed with very detailed and breakdown and oversight. And I thought after a few interaction exchange on the depth of game, I thought it would be a great guest on the podcast, which he kindly accepted. So please, Chase, introduce yourself so that the audience know actually who you are.
Sure. And thanks for having me, French. So my name's Chase Amante. I'm from Girls Chase. And if you're unfamiliar with me, so we run the largest men's dating advice website online, girlschase.com. We've had 64 million visitors over the last 16 years, got over 14,000 customers, and our focus is on getting girls to chase you. So we've introduced a lot of topics. We cover a lot of stuff. We're really focused on giving guys the most practical tips that they can go out and use just so that guys can create the kind of lives that they want with women, have better relationships, and bring more of the girls that they want into their lives.
All right, perfect. So what would you say has been your main influence in game from, let's say, the 2000s till these days?
Well, if I talk about particular people, I actually had a couple of mentors early on who were pretty well known and who have left the space, but they have both specifically asked to not be referenced because they don't want to be associated with pickup or seduction anymore, which I think is kind of a crime because they're both brilliant guys. But aside from them, I was influenced a lot by some early movies that I saw. Like one that influenced me, my style, was The Saint with Val Kilmer, which is kind of a throwaway thriller movie. But Kilmer takes on this role where he's adapting himself to women and coming across very smoothly. He's a thief, so he's kind of got some extra information already. But I really like that style of, can you figure out what makes a woman tick and then adapt yourself to her in a way that really charms her? And so that was a big influence for me. And I would just say just the general natural game movement. There was a natural game movement in RSD, which I know it was one of your influences. But there was a pre-RSD natural game movement, which was really focused on skill building, where you're going to build up the ability to have this natural conversation with anyone, and right off the top of your head, you're coming up with different conversation topics and different angles and frames and everything. And I think the RSD version was a little bit different from that, focused more on some routine elements, and they had different guys teaching different things. So, and I don't know what all of them were teaching.
I think it was Max that was like natural game and everything. And to be honest, most people just like a cookie cutter version so that it helps with their roadmap and everything. It's interesting you said that it was a movie, I mean, a character in a movie that actually really influenced you. Because in a way, for me, interestingly enough, you know what you're talking about. You know, when people, I remember I was talking with this guy and he was saying to me, like, after all those years of chasing and picking up women and blah, 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 like, what would you say has been your main takeaways? And I said, forget about the routines, forget about everything. Main takeaways is improve your communication skills and your psychological understanding of people, right? But also it is a good way for you to understand who you are. You know, even though technically a lot of time guys chase girls out of lack of, I won't say self-awareness, but self-acceptance or even self-knowledge. But then you actually gain that. It's almost like through rejection, you get to know who you are by understanding who you're not. And when it comes to movie character, even though for me it was the RSD, but it was more Todd V and Julian. Todd V for the very technical aspect, because I like systems. I'm very much a system guy. And Julian more of the vibe. But when it comes to a character, I don't know if, have you ever watched Nip Tuck?
I'm familiar with the show, but I haven't watched it.
Yeah, but in terms of identity, in terms of frame, it was like Christian Troy. It was like that plastic surgeon. He had a really good line. He was like, "This woman is simple. You need to have a nice smile and a good line of bullshit." And you know, and also just having that charisma, having that thing about themselves that basically oozes confidence, right? But yeah, it's interesting. And over time, what would you say has been the biggest shift personally when it comes to how you started? You know, when you first were introduced to that field to now, what would you say has been the biggest personal shift in the way you approach things?
Yeah, it's an interesting question. So I could tell you that from having worked with so many guys over the years, I've noticed that guys have different learning paths. They all start in different places and they have different milestones and different shifts. And for me, it's kind of different from what it was for a lot of guys, but I've seen a few other guys that have the same kind of trajectory. For me, I always had a really good social sense from the very beginning. I was doing like social experiments when I was in the 6th and 7th grade to see how people would react to me. And I always had this very strong instinct of, I think I know what's going to work and what will get people to do what I want them to do. And I'm usually correct. But I had this confidence issue where I felt afraid of doing it, because if I do it, maybe people they won't react how I want them to react, or, maybe other people are going to be watching and judging me or whatever it is. And that was the biggest one for me. It was being able to get to the point where I could just do what I know is going to work, and I'm not worried about how are people going to react, what are other people going to watch. Getting to the point where if there's a beautiful girl standing there and there's a bunch of people around and there's no other better opportunity to talk to her, I just walk right up to her and talk to her. I'm not worried about, are the other people going to be judging me or whatever? Because now in my head, it's like they're going to think that I'm a pretty cool dude because I'm walking right up to this beautiful girl. None of them could do that. It's a totally different mindset shift when you...
And actually, have you done your MBTI by any chance?
Yeah, it's what is it? The ENTJ, or sometimes INTJ. I'm like right on the border between E and I. Extroverted, introverted.
Okay, no, but it's the J, because what I've noticed is the people that are on the P side are more happy to be that, but a lot of people that are on the J side are very judging of themselves, and they project that harsh judgment by other people who actually don't give a fuck about them as they think they do. So it's interesting. TJ, it's actually I did run an experiment on my followers on my feed, and INTJ was like the massive winner, even though they sort of represent about 2-3% of the population.
So are you P or you J?
Oh, for me, I'm an ENTP, so more an extrovert, but I'm not
so
like
you hear
that
me talking, you're like, why would you worry about that?
Yeah, it's all right, but what's interesting is there's this guy I know, it's kind of like, he's ENTJ, so it's ENTJ, he's extrovert, but I'm just like, but the thing is, before I was like those type of tests and everything, I was like, some bollocks, like some fucking girl shit, astrology bullshit. Anyway, and I started picking up on, and start asking people. I was like, some stuff. There are some patterns I see. There's some patterns I see, and I think that the J is really holding a lot of people back from improving because they are too worried and focused on other people by projecting their own sense of judgment towards others or towards themselves.
Yeah, 100%. I can tell you, for me, for years, it was a thing. One of the, we were just talking, so we've got a forum, which is probably one of the leading remaining seduction forums, or the leading remaining seduction forum. But we were talking about, like, what are your earliest experiences getting rejected by a girl? And I had one where I was in 1st grade and I rode the bus to school every day with a 2nd grade girl that I got a crush on. And I would talk to her and everything. And one day I decided I was going to propose marriage to her. So I approached this 2nd grade girl and I was like, let's get married. We can do our honeymoon in the Caribbean. And she was like, I wouldn't marry you. You're a 1st grader. Because, it was like a big deal. I'm so immature because I'm 1st grade. She's 2nd grade. And I was crushed. But what was worse was I thought that everyone would find out and judge me. So I was going to the cafeteria to eat lunch every day, and I would hear kids laughing, and I'd be like, they're laughing about me because she rejected me. Just for like 3 months, this was plaguing me. Every time kids would be laughing in the cafeteria, I'm like, they're laughing at me. And finally, one day it clicked for me. I was like, it's been 3 months. There's no way that they're laughing about it. They probably didn't even know the day that it happened. I doubt anybody cares. This is ridiculous. So it's like important first grade life lessons.
Exactly, right? You shared an out, so out of goodwill, and for as well, I was not always French OG, far from it. I remember I was in year 12. I mean, grade 12 grade in the US, right? Year 12 in the UK. So I lived in the US, so I know a little bit of your stuff. Anyway, and I remember I just started dating with this blonde hottie and everything. And she was living very close to me. Soon after I dated her, it was her birthday. And I just saw, well, I'm a cool guy. I'm a chill dude, right? I mean, it's not like I would say, I decided to buy flowers. And just went there, right? Just went to her place. I've never been to her place before, but just kind of just wanted to do a surprise because I'm just like, whatever, She was not really having it. I mean, she got the flowers, I didn't know, but then after the next day at school, I got fucking laughed at. Needless to say, that didn't end well, and that cut short very soon, because it's almost like she thought it was a sucker or anything. And I was like, hey, well, it is what it is. The old romantic. I mean, I was still romantic still years after that. But anyway. And funnily enough, right, even though shame doesn't kill. That's what I'm saying. Shame doesn't kill even in the school. Right? So if you can leave that through that, you're good. And then funnily enough, what's great with Facebook is you get to see them 10 years down the line, 15 years down the line. That hot bombshell, past 30, got married to some cleanup man. I mean, I saw him. I mean, definitely not the first choice. And man, that was bad sight. I was like, yeah, you see, karma's a bitch, because you ain't looking hot at all. So again, this is what to say. Whatever happens at this point in time, on a long enough timeline, it doesn't fucking matter.
Yeah. And I think another thing to keep in mind with that is you'll tend to assume what's in other people's heads. You think, oh, I think they're thinking this about me. They must be thinking that. One of the lessons that you realize is that most people are much more concerned with themselves and how other people are thinking about them than they are worried about you or judging you. They're worried what you're thinking about them. And another thing is that most of the time when you're trying to guess what's in someone else's head, you're just completely wrong. If we're talking about like past flames, I had a girl that she was first chasing me when I was in junior high, and then it switched and suddenly I was chasing her, and she still liked me, but she was in the position of power, so she was resisting, and we never ended up getting together. At some point I still had a crush on this girl years later, and I kind of broke down and sent her this like sappy email about like, oh, I always loved you or whatever, and she never wrote me back. And I was like, maybe she didn't get it, but now I know she probably did, just ignored it. And I always thought, like, who knows what happened with her. Later, once Facebook opened, I added, like, all the people from high school, and they all added me back, but she didn't. I was like, she must be disgusted with me. And so years later, I decided to, like, cyber stalk her one last time, and I found her wedding pictures. And she got married to this guy that looked exactly like me, but 5 years older and a little bit fatter. And I was like, that's crazy. And I'm looking through her wedding pictures. And then I see this one where she's got these sunglasses and a sweater on, and she looks exactly like the chick that I had. So I dated this chick, and then I ended up marrying her, and we didn't stay married for very long. But she looked exactly like the chick that I married. And I was like, holy crap, she married a guy that looks just like me, and I briefly married a girl that looked a lot like her. And I was like, what the heck is going on here? Apparently we influenced each other.
You see, it's interesting because I was talking with a very intelligent girl on X, right? And she was saying, female friend, saying, we end up with replicas of the people we lost. It's interesting because that story that you said just remind me of a story with this girl that I had like this strong connection, but I didn't want to commit for various reasons, right? And like you, afterwards, I was like, fuck. And she was chasing at first. And then the dynamic shift, and I was chasing. But it's kind of like it just broke down because it was not organic enough, and it always felt like one was compensating for something, etc., and it just felt like contrived on both sides. On her end when it was on my end when it was on her chasing, and on my end when she was chasing. And no, when I was chasing. And interestingly enough, she married a guy tall like me, bit fatter like me, not as good looking as me, but more compliant than me. And I was like,
it was the nice guy French.
No, but the funny thing is, but when I was a dickhead, she loved it, right? And then I was like, you know what? I've got to repent for my former sin. She got to trust me again. And then when I did that shit, it was not the more dickhead French that she liked. The thing is, she wanted the nice man French that was always nice, because she knew that I was not going to be always nice. So there you go.
Yeah, he momentarily got weak, but later he's gonna turn back to his old self.
Who knows? Maybe I'll get a Hey Stranger one of these days. But this is to say, guys, the universe and life has a funny way of finishing the puzzle. And whatever you think you're going through hard times, whether it is getting girls, whether it's getting over a breakup, everything, with time you'll laugh at it, and sometimes you'll have look backs, whether that will come from randomness or whether that will come from that person that you thought was so important or interesting. So it is to de-dramatize whatever you're going through, and especially in the month of December, because December is a month where you have a lot of breakups happening, New Year's, new beginnings, etc. So bear that in mind if you're going through tough times.
Great advice.
Yeah. I mean, the thing is, at the end of the day, we guys, I find, and you tell me if that was the thing, is that we grow the most through failures and through hurts. And if you don't go through them, you cannot grow as fast or as in depth. What do you think?
Yeah. I mean, you can learn from successes. Successes are important. You know, they're motivating. They show you that you can do it. It's actually working. They reinforce, but where you really get the big lessons from is the failures. Why didn't it work? What did I do wrong? What can I do differently? Because when you're succeeding, there's not as much introspection, generally speaking. You know, you don't have to go back and, oh, what do I need to change? You're like, I'm doing everything great. Just keep doing what I'm doing. I guess it's working. There's less of a push to do it.
Don't change a winning team, as they say. Also, another thing which actually, so you and I have a friend in common. You and I have a friend in common, and we talk about other content creators or dating coach or whatever we have. We meet in the space, right? Not necessarily on X, but like on YouTube. And one of those things is interesting because he was talking to me about a guy called Casey Zander, which I think has some good stuff. Don't get me wrong. We mean, him and I think he's misguided when he says that we should not escalate. We should let the girl come to us, etc., etc. And it's interesting because I had a client just basically going on his paywall content, thinking that this doesn't make sense or this doesn't sound right. And the whole subject was escalation. Right? The whole subject was escalation, and I wanted to have your opinion on that, and what me and our common friend were discussing about.
Well, yeah, I don't know Casey Zander's recommendations in particular. If you're not escalating, so I can give a couple of different perspectives on that. One is I see a lot with guys that will come to our site. So I have something that I've been teaching for a number of years that I call the law of least effort, which is that if you want to look more social power is just the results that you get divided by the effort that you appear to put in to get it. So the more results you're getting, but the more effortless you appear in getting them, the more socially powerful you look. And the thing with that is a lot of guys will hear that and they think, I have to just be as effortless as possible. Maybe I'll just put in no effort at all. And they forget the results aspect of the equation. Because if you're just sitting off in the corner, putting in no work, and you're not getting any results, you don't look socially powerful. You're just some question mark guy off in the corner. It's the results. You got to have the results. And so that's something that I've had to go through with guys again and again. Guys are trying to look cool. They're like, I don't want to, if I make a push for it, maybe I won't look cool. I might get rejected. And then I'm out there, putting myself out there. And what I've talked about with guys is there's a progression as you're learning where you're starting off as the unknown guy. You're tentative to do anything because you're afraid if I try something, I'm going to look weak. It's not going to work. And people are going to see me putting all this effort out there and get nothing back to the results. But you have to go through that. You have to go through that period where you're putting a lot of effort out there and you're getting nothing back for it. And you look kind of like the Joker, where people are like, look how hard he's working, get nothing for it. And then eventually, as you start to figure things out, now you're getting some results back for your effort. You're kind of like the hardworking guy who gets some effort. And eventually you get to the point where you are that king type of guy. You're putting in visibly less effort, but getting lots of results. And now behind that, there might be actually a lot of hard work that you're putting into or a lot of hard work in the past, but people don't see it. They just see you look so chill and doesn't look like you're doing much, but still girls are coming to you. People like you. People are valuing you.
I think one of the reasons is screening, because at the end of the day, there's so much that you can control into someone else's life or perspective of you. So technically what you're doing is just inviting the people that already have a good prejudice towards you rather than not. Because otherwise you'll be working harder to basically make them think something that they already didn't about you. I know that's kind of like where we meet, but I think also another thing which I think is more close to your point, which is you have to try too hard at first to understand that it doesn't work. And then afterward, you can create and filter the situation where you can avoid doing that. So whenever you're with the right people, you don't need to do as much. And therefore, you don't try hard because you already assume the win because they already gave you those little indicators that you're going to win.
Yeah, it's a big part of it. Being able to read people, know the situation, you know what works, what doesn't work, what is worth doing at this point, what is unnecessary, what will be counterproductive if you do it. But the other thing I was going to say on that escalation point was, so I had a friend who he gotten to the point where he'd had enough one night stands and he was kind of getting bored of the whole thing. So he decided to start setting himself some new challenges. And one of the challenges that he set for himself was he's going to start pulling girls, but he's not going to escalate on them at all. He's going to try and get them to do 100% of the escalation. So he would meet girls at clubs, and he would sometimes take them on dates or sometimes just pull them back home, and he would get them back to his place, and he'd sit out by the pool, and then he would just turn them on verbally with his words, but he would refuse to touch them, refuse to escalate on them, just to see if they would take command. And he started getting girls that would be really pissed off at him, and they'd be getting angry at him, and they'd be telling him, what are you just playing games with me? You're not going to do anything with me. What is going on? And they would get upset and they would storm off. And he was talking to me about it. He's like, oh, why do you think that's happening? I was like, dude, most girls do a certain, they'll push for things to a certain extent, but unless you're orchestrating it, most girls don't know what to do, or they're not practiced at it.
This is exactly what I said to my client at the end of the day. I said, it's a lot of bollocks, because at the end of the day, a girl cannot run a conversation. A girl rarely can run a conversation, cannot run a relationship, cannot run a man. So can she run her way to the bedroom? No, she can't. It's like, maybe she'll give you indicators as to green flag, you can go. Or you have to assume because she's too shy. And I think that a lot of time, girls are you think guys are afraid of rejection? Girls abhor rejection under whatsoever circumstances, right?
Yeah. And it's deadly.
And if you don't pick up on the signals, or if you don't orchestrate, as you say, they will see that as her being rejected. Therefore, she'll self-reject herself as an ego protection mechanism, rather than you playing too cool for school, and thinking that you're Mr. Billy Big Balls, you're a lion waiting for the lioness to come to you. When actually, like, if I look at myself, the thing is, because my frame is way more, I would say, I'm a bit more extrovert than introvert, and I'm way more sexual in my approach and very direct. So it's kind of like, it goes with the territory. But some people that may be a little bit more introverted or a little bit more reserved, it might be too much because it just doesn't align with their personality. But in the end, how many times did I have the girl literally jump on me? Very, very few. And I'm talking single-digit percentage. So what I strongly suggest guys to do, especially if you don't have a social status, like whether it's worldwide, whether it's local, or you're not that fucking hot chat, most likely you'll have to do all the work. Whilst appearing not doing so, as you say.
Yeah. Appear to be putting in as little work as possible, getting investment from her. You can do things where you're telling girls what to do. You can tell them to escalate on you, and if they're turned on enough, they'll do it. There was a guy on the old Fast Seduction forum named To Optimise, who was a really talented natural. He would pull off all these crazy lays. He was a nightclub bouncer, and he was picking up all these different models and strippers who were coming in. But he had this escalation technique where once he had a girl back at his place, because he was jacked and he liked showing off his back muscles. As part of his seduction routine, let him see his back. But he would say, oh, I had this really hard workout, and I really need a massage, but I need like a hard massage like a man would give. I don't know if you're strong enough to do that. And so he's challenging the girls, and they'll be like, yeah, sure, I could do it. And he'd get his shirt off, and he'd lay down, and they start massaging his back. And after a while, he lets them do it for a little bit. Of course, they're girls. They don't know how to take charge with it. So once they've been massaging him for a bit and they're putting the work in, then he'll say, that's not the right way to do it. You got to do it like this. And then he flips them over and he starts massaging them. And then from there, it just escalates into sex. But you can guide girls to do stuff, but you still got to be in charge.
It's funny because like the whole massage thing, instead of basically, oh, you know what, I'll give you a massage, make it them to do the massage and then to turn it back around. Don't get me wrong, I was a bouncer, right, for bars, and mate, that status, I was like, why should I go to bars? Why should I fucking go to bars? Because literally, that girl literally kissed on me when I was a bouncer in my shift, and it's like I was not paid well, and even sometimes I found some coworkers because I was moonlighting, right? And so, come work. What are you doing here? Like because I was like, making good money. And I'm just like, well, I don't get to drink. I get girls to basically jump at me, and and I'm saving myself money. Happy days. The patron, not the patrons, but the owners of the bar was like, well, I said, like, you gotta look over for for the people around you, and I said, I try and do my best, but there's also a customer service level,
Got to keep the lady satisfied.
And it's like, and then it get problematic because then afterwards you had girls basically coming back to basically go and shit on me. And I was like, well, this is, I was like, I'm not responsible for this. Anyway, that was a fun time. But status, even as a bouncer, especially for short-term stuff, can yield you positive results. So,
Oh yeah.
yeah, so escalation is key. I think also you brought a subject, a point that was interesting in our exchange, which is, and that's something that me and our common friend were discussing. And it's about within that date where there's a key line in between where she sees you as boyfriend material and she's like, close the legs, and when she kind of like sees you as not one. Can you like name it, and can you explain it a bit more in depth for our audience?
Yeah, absolutely. So, the original concept goes back to like the lover and provider concept, which comes from evolutionary psychology. It's been called different things, cads and dads. But basically, you've got the guys that are competing for women by providing a safe and stable and secure, dependable environment for them. These are like your nice guys, your guys that want to be gentlemen and treat women really well and take care of them, white knights, all those types of guys. And then you've got the lover or the cad or the sexy bad boy. And this is the guy who is the guy that's providing her a fun and exciting and sexy time. And from an evolutionary perspective, the one guy is providing better genes because this is a guy that is very appealing to lots of women and can provide her with sons who are going to spread her genes far and wide with lots of other women who are going to be very attracted to her sexy bad boy sons. But that guy, because he's got a lot of options with women, tends to not be so stable. So he's not as safe of a bet. So she's torn between that guy that's going to give her these sexy sons versus this other guy that's going to give her a stable environment to raise her children in. And so women are faced with this dichotomy, which guy do I choose? How do I choose between them? But basically, when we get down to our own dating, we can think about it in terms of who are you going to be to the girl? Because she's asking herself that as she's with you. Which box do you go into? Are you going to be the friend who is not someone that she wants to date or have sex with? She just wants to keep you around because you're a great guy to have around. You're useful. You can support her. You give her emotional support, financial support, whatever kind of support you're offering. But she doesn't feel any need to take it further than that. Or maybe she doesn't want to risk taking it further than that. If you're already providing lots of value, then she says, maybe it might be nice to date him, but maybe if it didn't work out, I would lose access to him in my life. So it's better if I don't let that happen, at which point you get stuck in the friend zone. And then you've got the guys who are the boyfriends, who is the guy that she's looking at and saying, wow, this could be a guy that I might actually have a relationship with. This could be a guy that I could keep around. I could maybe see myself with this guy longer term. But of course, for that guy, that's a big commitment, being around long term with a guy. So she's got to really vet that guy. She's got to take her time, be very careful, make sure that she's screened him and evaluated him very carefully. And she also she has to make sure that he sees her the right way as well. She's got to make sure that he sees her as commitment worthy. So she doesn't want to move too fast. She doesn't want to look slutty. She's got to make sure she looks like a good girl. That way he will value her as a long-term mate. And then she's got the sexy bad boy who is not worth keeping around as a friend because he doesn't really provide that friend value, and he's not the kind of guy that she would see herself having a relationship with for one of a couple of different reasons. He's not stable enough. He's not going to be around. He's just not available for that. But
he's not emotionally available.
Yeah, that could be one too. But he's sexy. She finds him exciting. She would like to have fun with him. He's turning her on, and so she goes with him. And now the thing that happens with girls is you can have these different qualities. You might have good friend value and be kind of a sexy guy and also have long-term value. And when she has these decisions to make, she's going to play it safer because she's like, he's sexy. I might like to go to bed with him, but I also might want a relationship with him. And a guy that I can have a relationship with doesn't come along every day. So I need to be careful with him. So she pumps the brakes on it, even though you are a sexy guy. And you'll see with a lot of guys that, they've made themselves these sexier guys, and then they're frustrated. Why are women still pumping the brakes with me and making me go on multiple dates? And then they're asking for assurances or what have you. And it's because she still sees you as a boyfriend candidate. Whereas if you can communicate to a woman that you're not open for boyfriend contention and get her to dismiss you for that, and you're also providing that sexy lover value, then you can have a much quicker time getting girls into bed. The challenge there is that if you tell her yourself, oh, I don't want to date you, then she will auto reject because you seem unattainable. You seem like you're telling her she's not worthy of a girlfriend role, which is going to hurt her ego. Now she needs to get away from you so she can protect her self-image. So you can't tell her yourself, I won't date you. You want her to conclude herself that you're not a guy that she wants to date. That's the challenge.
But you see, that's that's it. I mean, that's a very very well laid out challenge, because what I found myself was, so I used to, like, like sometimes people say, oh, it's just about frame, etc. I'm like, nah. Think about it this way. I said, like, and that was the source of our exchange. Was when I was dumbing myself down, when I was playing the caveman, very sexual, very driven, very dismissive, etc., etc., I would get the short stuff, right? Short-term stuff, right? And then when I was being me on a more holistic basis, right? I'm not a fucking meathead. I'm just a meathead. I'm not just, that dumb fun guy that talks shit all the time, blah, blah, blah. If I can be that thoughtful, that caring, that emotionally mature and empathetic, then legs closed, right? It's exactly that, like legs closed. And when I was not purposely focusing on the very sexually highly driven, dismissive, etc., etc., the girls would make me wait, and I was like, oh, fuck off. I fuck off, because I'm just like, you don't get me on a deeper level, right? Do I need to front you and make it like that massive billboard, like injury lawyer type of stuff, right? Or do I kind of like, can you not see a bit deeper than me, right? Or is it always all about you and never about me? Because what I found was the player's paradox is, you spend so much time in terms of adapting yourself to the wants and needs of the woman to get what you want, that very rarely you have someone do that for you. And ideally, you want, in terms, if you're looking for something serious, you want to have that in a woman, to see that she's as invested as you are in the process. And I think, and that what you were saying, which was very interesting, was you tend to find that with kinship, with strippers, with cluster bees and others, niceties. I forgot the other ones, but
Psychology department chicks.
Jack, they're freaks. And I was like, I actually have one right now speaking to me, and she said she was a former witch, and I was like, oh fuck me, I'm gonna get fucked. I love psychology, but her game on Bumble, I'm like, and that's the thing. It's so rare to find that, and you end up basically chasing your own tail by always appealing to what the girls want, and then you're losing yourself. Like, if I want something serious, do I really want to deal with someone that's so self-centered that they actually don't care how to appeal to me and just look at it from their own perspective? Do you see what I'm saying?
Yeah. I think the challenge in that is that a lot of times people don't know how much depth you have, and most people haven't learned. Most girls want to dig into you and get to know you to a certain extent. Are you familiar with the Byronic hero? Do you know that?
I mean, if you're talking about Lord Byron, right?
Yeah. So Lord Byron, so part of what made his romance novels so successful was he would create these multi-layered heroes, but the layers were easy for women to peel the layers back. And they have these Byronic character flaws, like he's a rebel, or he's, he had a past relationship where he hurt some girl and now he doesn't want to have a relationship anymore because he's afraid he's going to hurt another woman. So women see this and they're like, oh, this wounded guy, and he's got these vulnerabilities. Yeah, but they're sexy vulnerabilities. And they intrigue her and they make her want to find out more about you. So when you're framing yourself that way, you can get the girl to start doing the digging, and she starts digging in to find out more and more about you. And the girls get really intrigued. So it's, again, you got to do something to get her to do that. You can't, it's very hard to find the girls that you can just sit back and they're just going to do all the digging themselves, because just like anything, like you want to, let's say you want to get someone to really go watch a movie and have this, here's this new blockbuster movie. If they don't do a good job intriguing you in the trailer, you're gonna be like, I don't need to see another movie.
Of course.
But if you watch the trailer and you're like, oh, that's really interesting looking, I'm so intrigued, I want to know what happens. It seems like, then that's when you go up and you'll show up to the premiere and you'll book your seat and you'll sit there and then you get hooked in. So there's this art of,
but it depends upon how you want it. But
Yeah,
of course, you can get her to invest, right? But it's about at which pace. Do you see what I'm saying? Like, in a way, it's almost like I want to let her carry the burden of a bit like, you see, it's a bit like your friend that was kind of like, you know what? I
yeah,
want to
yeah.
invite them to escalate, like, because I'm bored of just doing the same shit over and over again.
Yeah, it's the experienced guy thing. It's the
Yeah.
same thing we were talking about before on X. I've got a buddy right now who really smart guy. He's got a PhD. He's been an entrepreneur. He's been in a bunch of newspapers and like mainstream media publications
Mhm.
and everything. And he was a coach for I don't know how familiar are with the old pickup guys. Brad P. Did you know him? Glenn
That
P.
rings a bell. Wasn't he part of the game book or something? I think he rings a bell.
He might have been. I think he was. It was a little bit after,
Okay, fine. What Brad Pitt?
but he was pretty well known. But this guy was a coach for those guys, and he was a prolific gamer for a while. But at this point, he's in his 50s, and he's lost much of his interest in it. The motivation dies down, and he had this girl that was perfect for him in every way, and just beautiful girl, really smart, great personality match. They had incredible sexual chemistry. He was just everything that you wanted. They were engaged to be married, but he has this system that he was a university professor as well, and he's teaching people how to work through problems and think about things rationally. And the issue that he had was that he kept teaching this system to his girlfriend because he wanted her to use it to solve drama when she would cause drama. And he's like, I just want a woman that can use this on me. Why can't I get a woman who can use this system on me instead of I always have to be the one to solve the drama? And he said, if I tell her what to do, she'll do it, but I want her to do it on her own. So finally, one day, she got upset about something, and he just sat there and didn't try to solve it, and just waited to see if she would use his system on him or try to solve the drama in some way. And she did nothing, and then ended up leaving, and they ended up breaking up. And he and I were talking about this later, and I was like, you realize that women cause drama as like the relationship stress test. Like they want to see how you react. They're testing your level of investment and how much you care. And if you don't react, then the message she gets from that is like, I guess he just doesn't care anymore. I guess he's just given up on the relationship. So she's going to leave and find a guy that's going to be more invested. And he was like, do you think I should? It's like a year later. He's like, do you think I should give her another chance? I was like, it's probably too late. It's probably too late now.
I mean, for a guy that was in the game, you should know that. But the thing is, it's interesting, right? It's like you reach some type of pinnacle of game, and it's like you're just trying to breach the new limits. Can you basically get someone to breach her own
You're
nature
like,
in order to get
I'm
your
tired of doing all
outcome?
this work. It's time for the women to pick up the slack.
I've graduated, PhD. It's like, yeah, give me a
Uh,
bloody break. But the thing is, if you've had that once or twice or thrice, but out of countless hundreds or whatnot, like lays or what, and it's kind of like it's so hard, and in a way, it's almost like the male equivalent of the woman who's got 100 buddies and looking for that golden dick. It's like it's so hard for you to go to a lower levels and what you found, and in a way, in exposing yourself so much, what you find is you become much more peculiar upon what you like and what you don't like, and that can actually work against you long term if you seek to have a family, a relationship, and everything, because there's always that idea of settling. Whereas before, when you didn't have as much experience, you didn't really have any benchmark, so it was a bit harder. So I guess it comes with the territory.
yeah, and I've got an article on my site called "What's the End Game for a Playboy?" Because at this point, I've been in the game for a long time. I know a bunch of guys that are in their 40s and 50s who were prolific playboys in the past, and you don't stay that way forever. You're not going to be the 60-year-old guy still going out to the club and picking up chicks and swiping on apps all the time. You get to a point where you're like, all right, I've been there, done that, had a good time with it, but now I need to focus more of my energy on other things in life. And so what happens to the guy that was picking up all these girls in the past? What's he doing now? And some of the guys I know will get to a point where they're like, you know what, I want a family. I'm just going to pick the best possible chick. I'm not as worried about maybe like falling in love or anything. I want to build like a family. So they pick a chick and they do that with her. Some guys are like, they get to the point where they're like, I just don't really have much motivation for women anymore. And they end up becoming celibate for long periods of time,
Yeah,
which is kind of
funny
surprising.
enough.
Here's a guy that was banging tons of chicks for a long time, and now he's been celibate for a couple of years. You're like, wow, it's like a crazy shift. I knew one guy who shifted into hookers in Southeast Asia, because he got there and he was, for him, I think I might have mentioned him in an X response. His thing was like, it feels like going on a date is like 2 to 3 hours of free therapy for these. You're giving them 2 to 3 hours of free therapy, and then the reward is that you get to bang them. And his thing was like, if I go to Southeast Asia, they've got these go-go's and the girls there, basically it simulates a pickup, except it's exactly what you would want as a guy. Like, it's just smooth and easy. The girl's interested in you. She's asking all these questions. She's fascinated with you. And there's none of the resistance or roadblocks. Just pick her up, take her back home, passionate sex, pay her at the end. She leaves. Great. And, I had a little bit of experience with that. And I was like, I should never get involved in this because I could see how it could be really addicting, because especially, the hookers in like the US or Europe or whatever, a lot of them are pretty business-like.
Transaction. You don't want to feel that transaction.
Yeah. But the ones in Southeast Asia, man, they're like, oh my God, they're really passionate about the sex. And then right afterwards, they're like, oh God, I really feel this great connection with you. And these chicks are pros, man. The chicks in Southeast Asia, they'll have like 4 or 5 foreign boyfriends back in Europe or wherever, sending them money every month. Because the guy leaves and he's like, I don't want you having a hook anymore. I just want you to be my girl. I'm going to send you money so you don't have to be a prostitute. She's like, yeah, definitely. And then she's got like 4 of these guys. They're all sending her money so that she doesn't have to prostitute. She's still going out and picking up guys anyway. And you're like,
me love you long time.
Yeah, exactly. It's crazy.
They're ruthless, but I tell you, it's like, I mean, I have a friend, he's got yellow fever, right? Like, funnily enough, recently, right, he told me, like, my brother, I've never seen him like this. He says to me, like, it's like, he's really down for a girl. He's like, he's almost 40, right? And it's like, and the girl is like half Chinese, half something else, right? His best friend originally was like not into Asian stuff, right? And end up first with a South Korean that is still alpha whittled by, and then now he's with a Filipina or Filipino. Do we say Filipino or Filipino girl? I'm not sure.
Filipino is female, Filipino is the male.
Okay, yeah, no, just double checking if, yeah. So a Filipino girl, right? And I'm not, and he says to me, like, it's like, trust me, it will happen to you. And I'm like, listen, I was at uni in the UK. Chinese people, they think I'm fucking goofy. I'm a goofball because I'm a bit too out there in your face, right? Like, they're more, demure. And my dad was a diplomat, right? He was like, he kept on saying me like books from Burma, like the Chinese, you love the Chinese, etc., etc. I feel like I'm being, but I'm just like, I'm not, And then, like, I meet like one of the girls I'm speaking with on X, right? She, she's of East Asia, and I'm just like, when's the last time I had this level of femininity in a woman that was not close to being a virgin? I'm just like, it feels nice. And I think that's what you're basically saying about those Southeast Asian prostitutes versus the very masculine, business-like transaction of the Western, the Western ones, because essentially seduction is covering up the transaction behind the interaction of individuals so that it feels smooth and human-like. However, transactional, in objective terms, a relationship or the interaction is. And that's the thing. That's the whole game, technically.
Yeah, that's a great way of thinking about it. I think it's interesting to note that seduction didn't come out of Latin America or Southeast Asia or places where people are inherently more passionate. It didn't come from Italy or Greece or Spain. It came from the United States, Canada, Western Europe. I was reading I read a lot of science papers on this stuff, and there was one tracing the modern history of seduction, and they placed it in, I think it was at mid-18th century Paris, might have been 17th century, but all the stuff about how Parisians were seducing each other. So yeah, and so when you take a look at these, I don't know if it's how much of it is ethnic, how much of it is culture, but people closer to the equator, the Latinos in South America or the Southeast Asians, they tend to be more passionate and to just have natural passion, and they're wearing their hearts on their shirt sleeves. Actually, one of the things that you hear a lot about come from the Italian men or Spanish men or Greek men, and like, oh, the women are so reserved here because I just go up and I'm so passionate with them, but that's their natural style. And I think if you are from a more reserved ethnicity. If you're a light-skinned European or East Asian, a lot of seduction is learning, can you show more of this passion and be a more passionate individual? Because if you can, right away you're head and shoulders above the more staid, stoic people. But there's a lot of resistance to it too. Like a lot of guys are like, I gotta be this manly, stoic guy.
It's very interesting because, like, like, say for example you have a Latin guy, right? A Latin guy with British type of girls, or even Eastern European type of girls, right? What's gonna find is, it's like, how do I say, you're trying to not outsource, but export your means of vibing with someone whose means of vibing is different. And in a way, you need to match it much more than differentiate in it, because otherwise there's too much of a dissonance, I find. And it's like, and what you will basically express, as you're saying, just kind of like natural, will be overinvestment, over keenness, or even sound phony, because their mental models is born out of, let's say, reservedness. And it's like, even though I know where it's coming from, I'm like, calm down, because this is not going to work the way you want to work. Or if it's going to work, it's going to work with the woman within that segment, whether it's Eastern European, whether it's British, whether it is North American, whether it is Canadian, whatever, that will already have a tropism towards it. But if you want to find and work with girls that are not part of that tropism, you need to dial it down, because otherwise you'll just knock yourself out. That's been my experience, per se. I don't know what's your viewpoint on this.
Yeah, certainly. I mean, if you're not calibrated to the energy of the girl, then it's just, the two of you are in different places. The advantage I find, so typically I find that for a lot of guys that are from a calmer standpoint, once you can manifest a bit more passion and energy, then you're able to lead things forward better. And you're able to jump in with girls who, I've noticed in general, girls tend to be more excitable, energetic. They're more open about what they're feeling and how they're feeling it. Whereas a lot of guys feel like they have to be stoic and reserved. And it's hard for men to communicate with women or connect on the same level when they're being too stoic. So there's a certain amount of self-liberation that has to occur, where one of the things I've heard a couple of different guys that I know that we'll talk about is very feminine guys who pick up a lot of girls because they're very, just the way that they behave. Yeah, flamboyant. They're basically almost gay, except that they're not gay, they're straight, and girls go for it. And guys that go to gay clubs a lot, I used to pick up in like a semi-gay clubs where there's a lot of gay guys, but there's plenty of girls there too. And those places are like some of the best for meeting girls because the women are receptive. Most guys aren't hitting on them at all. They see gay guys around. The gay guys turn them on because they're complimenting them all the time. They're like, "Oh, girl, you look so beautiful," and "I love this dress," and blah, blah, blah. And the girl's getting aroused by all these compliments, and then the guy just runs off. But there's all this sexual energy in the air. But guys that can manifest that without being, not going as far as the gay guy, it's exciting and engaging to girls. But again, to the point that has to be calibrated. If you go too far, then it's like, what is this guy doing? This is too much. It's way too much. And a lot of the Italian guys or Arabic guys or what have you, they come to Western countries and try it with girls. It's just overbearing. And the girls like, this is too much.
That's exactly the word, overbearing. Like my best friend, right? He's British, right? And he called me flamboyant sometimes because I'm like that extra Mediterranean look, French. But I was pulling chicks. Like I said to him, I don't know anyone that basically can go on a night out and pull as many chicks as you do. It's like, even though I'm technically not the stoic and masculine, whatever type of shit. And one of the most common shit tests that I used to get was, "Are you gay?" And I'm just like, "Well, I suggest you try out and tell me for yourself." So, that's what I would, that's what I would go back with. And and then what was interesting was I trying to do the complete opposite. I try to do the complete opposite by being stoic, masculine, like that. And what happened is I was not getting as good results because it was not congruent to not only the archetype and persona where people were seeing me. However, I improved on some other level of communication, which was also a good thing. But what I find is that, and I think the subject of calibration, I think, is a very interesting subject as well that we need to discuss. But what I find is that a lot of time you'll find guys too much on one extreme or the other. It's like, if you're too, let's say, stoic / autistic / non-reactive, you are going to lose on the vibe front. So you have to kind of like dial it up a little bit, not changing who you are. But if you're too much on the flamboyant, in your face / aka overbearing, you have to dial it down a bit. So in a way, kind of like associating. But the thing is, you're never going to please everyone. That's the thing, and that's the whole thing with calibration. You're never going to please everyone, but on the small margin, whenever there is actually a potential match, this is where calibration comes in. However, I think that's something which kind of, and I want to hear your thoughts on this. When I look at calibration as a subject matter, I'm thinking, well, isn't that going against congruence, against being just be yourself and stuff? Or is it just something that you naturally do in social settings? Because the way I look at it is, for tier 1 girls, so I'm tiering girls, right? You have tier 1, tier 2, tier 3. So I have tier 1 girls, the one that are really into you, right? So almost anything that you can do is going to be interpreted positively. So unless you really, really do everything to fuck it up, you're golden, right? So don't mess it up. Then you have the tier 2 girls who are kind of like the maybes, the one that shit test you. The tier 1, they give banter. It's not shit test, it's banter, right? The tier 2, they shit test you because they're a bit on the fence, and they're more likely to disqualify you than qualify you, because the tier 1 girls have already qualified you because they like your looks, or they like your vibe, or whatever, and then the tier 3 girls is like, there's no point, you're just wasting your time. And I find that you don't need calibration that much with tier 1, but calibration will be one of the main vectors with tier 2. Tell me what you're thinking on calibration as a subject. Is it whether congruent or not? And whether you found the same analysis as mine.
Yeah. It's a interesting way to put it, and I would agree with that. I'm going to jump back real quick, and then I'll return to that, because I had an interesting thought when we were talking earlier about the energy. Just from like a deep theory kind of perspective, are you familiar with the idea of the Overton window?
Hold on. It's quite funny because actually I mentioned that expression last podcast with 007. The Overton window is basically like in media, or like in politics, because I was talking about politics, where it is the idea that you cannot say certain things outside of the Overton window, otherwise you'll be cancelled, basically. It's like the realm of acceptable.
There's a range of acceptability, and it can move. Something's too far in the extreme, unacceptable here, on the other side, unacceptable. As it moves, something that was unacceptable before becomes acceptable. Something that was acceptable over here becomes unacceptable as the Overton window moves. Well, I think you could say that there's a kind of energetic Overton window based on culture or ethnicity or what have you, where there's a range you can operate within, where it's too stoic on one side, too energetic on the other side, and it moves from culture to culture. Where is this range of what energy level can you have to still be kind of acceptable versus being too far to one extreme or the other? And if you travel a lot and you interact with different cultures, you have to be able to adapt to the local energetic Overton window, just from a purely theoretical standpoint.
I think it's actually very interesting. I never thought it like that, but I think it must be your NT talking to my NT. So I love it.
Gotta be it. So back to the calibration issue. Yeah, I mean, there's so one of the ways that I define, and when I first wrote this, I think I gave it the wrong title and confused a lot of guys. So I wrote an article years ago called Attraction. It's either there or it isn't. And then I specified that I'm talking about one type of attraction, and I split it into two kinds. There's fascination, which is what I define as this kind of strong initial attraction that's just always there. And the moment she meets you, she has it for you or you have it for her. It's just there. And that would be, I would classify your tier 1 girls as that. Like, it's really hard to screw it up with those girls. You know, she's just into you. Even if you screw it up, she's going to keep giving you more chances. Whereas there are the girls that don't have that for you. You know, they don't have that instant desire for you, but you can turn them on and excite them and attract them with what you're doing or the way you're behaving. And that's what I would consider exciting the attraction in them. So not initially fascinated with you the way those other girls are. And that would be the tier 2 girls. But that's also easier to lose, because if you're not doing things correctly, then you will lose, and then they'll be disappointed. Oh, he's not what I thought he was. I thought he was going to be this, but he's not. Or I thought maybe he could take the lead, but he can't. And so with those types of girls, yeah, you need to have stronger calibration, because they're not as forgiving. You don't get as much leeway with them. And then, but the other thing you're asking about is this not being yourself if you're calibrating yourself. And the answer to that, I would say, is, we can think about the way that we interact with different people throughout our lives. You think about the way that you interact with your boss, the way that you interact with your mom, the way that you interact with your customers or your audience on X, the way that you interact with a girl that you met off of a dating app, or the way that you interact with someone you've been friends with for a long time. The way you interact with each of these people is different, and you're adjusting yourself to them because you know that different people like different things. Okay, this friend of mine, he's really cool, but I know if I talk about this one thing, it's going to piss him off. So I'm not going to talk about that thing because I know it drives him crazy. Or like I know my boss prefers to hear this kind of thing. So you could be the unfiltered guy who just speaks his mind to everybody, but you're going to end up pissing a lot of people off because nobody has the exact same brain that you have. We all have differences, and having enough social grace to be mindful of that. There's a line between, like, I have to be totally raw and unfiltered and say everything I'm thinking the moment I'm thinking it and just belt it out there, versus like I have to totally suppress myself and be fake and present this false face to everybody. There's a line where you can present. Yeah. Choose the sides of yourself that are going to fit with somebody else. And I mean, if there's something that you have to say because it has to be said that the other person's not going to like, then say it. But try and figure out a way that you can say it in a socially graceful way that the other person will at least be able to understand.
You're not there to break eggs on her head, right? Or on his head. I think when you like the way you framed it was actually very thoughtful in terms of calibration in the delivery. It's not so much like thing is, it's like you can say the same thing in different ways and it can be perceived or appreciated differently. But calibration can also be about your behavior, etc. And that thing, it's like in a way, and this is going to be a challenge. I'm going to say to you, right? By the way, I'm not against or for calibration as a certain. It definitely has a certain use and a certain purpose. So it's not so much that. The idea is, if you're looking for a girl, right, that is, or a group of girls that you have a little harem or rotation, whatever you want to call it, wouldn't it be better that they are completely in your frame, no matter how much the contour of the frame are hard and fast, than ones where you always have to kind of like tippy-toe dance on that thread in between building 1 to building 2 type of thing, as you said, fine line? Or is it better to kind of like being this type of chameleon that goes from being that diplomat with one girl to that other diplomat from other, and in a way kind of mellowing yourself so that you lose yourself? So is the dichotomy between identity and socially flexible?
Yeah, it's a great question. My particular opinion. So first off, I think it kind of depends on your goals. So if you are someone who is in like an active training up period, like I'm trying to perfect my social skills as much as possible, then there is an advantage to having people around that. I went through a period in life where I had all these people with very different personalities around me. And every time I was with someone else, I was having to just readapt my personality to very different people. And, if I mixed those people, they would have hated each other. And sometimes I did mix them just to see what happened. And it's fascinating. And you upgrade yourself a lot. But at the same time, it is a little bit tiring because you're constantly having to adjust yourself. And usually with most of those people, you're not being your full self that you want to be when you're most comfortable or at ease. So there's an advantage to it. My personal preference, if you're going to get, like, especially for a long-term girlfriend, but even for any kind of girl that you're going to keep around in your life in any capacity, if you're building your rotation of friends with benefits, then it's better to have those be the girls that you feel an initial connection with. And depending on your goals, you can still be adapting yourself a lot to girls that are very different and still just have a one-night stand with them. Just not keep them around. Just don't pull them into your rotation afterwards. There's no, so long as you're not leading them on, there's no harm in that. But the more you're having to adjust yourself with different women, then the more work it is to maintain that, and the quicker it becomes exhausting and not worth the work. So my preference is always to look for girls that I feel a strong connection with, especially with a girlfriend. If I'm going to have a girl as a girlfriend, there's two sides to that. The first one is I've got to have a strong initial fascinated attraction for her that should be or should feel mutual. And then after that, then you go through all the logical screening. Like, okay, I know that emotionally I really like this girl. Does she meet my logical criteria? Sometimes she will, sometimes she will not. Sometimes you start talking to her, you're like, oh no, this girl's gonna be trouble. Stay away from that girl.
This is actually a good point. You think that you want, like, you thing is, like, you think originally, oh, you know what, I just want something peaceful. Then you find yourself with a troublesome lady or girl. It can be very, very, how do you call it? Intoxicating. And then you lose yourself, you lose your energy, your bandwidth. It's great, it's fun, it's like a nice wild ride, but you know, sometimes you puke in that nice ride. And you know, over time, as you get older and your heart rate only can sustain a certain bounce per second, no bounce per minute. So bear that in mind. Wisdom is spoken just here. Logical reasoning why you should be with that girl, because otherwise you're not doing yourself a favor. But yeah, so basically it's just yeah. Go ahead.
I was going to ask, have you read David Dita, The Way of the Superior Man?
You know, you're the second person that actually told me about that book.
I had people tell me about it for years before I read it.
All right, can you kind of like give me very summed up why that book has to be read?
You know, it's been so many years since I read it. I don't remember anything else from it. I remember that I liked it, but there was one thing that I remember that's always stuck in my head. And Dita talks about how there are these, I forget what he calls them. Let's call them fire and ice girls. Maybe that's the term that he uses. You know, the fire girls are like the feisty girls. It's dramatic when you're with them, but they're very passionate. And then the ice girls, they're very calm, tranquil. They don't cause a lot of drama. And when you're with one, you start to long to be with the other one. You know, you're with the fiery girl and you're like, oh, gee, it would be so nice to be with a relaxing, calm girl who wasn't giving me all this trouble. And then you break up with the fiery girl and then you get with the ice girl and you're like, it's nice for a while. But then after a while, you're like, I don't know, I'm feeling kind of bored with this girl. And she's really nice and everything, but God, I'm bored. And you break up with her and you get the fiery girl again. It just goes back and forth. And there's merit to both, in my opinion. And I think the general red pill orthodoxy, I would say, is you got to like pick the calm girl that's going to be submissive. And there's merit in that. But the other side of that is that those relationships are also a lot more likely to be the boring ones. And I've seen guys, you know, I've got friends that have gone with the fiery girls and they'll routinely get frustrated, but still years later, they're still with the girl and they still have a passionate sex life and they're still doing fine with their lives. And I've also got friends that have gone with like the calm, tranquil girls, and at some point they just either stop having sex with the chick or they end up doing swingers or something else to try and keep the because you need to find some other source of stimulation because the girl herself is just not stimulating.
It's blend.
So that would be the other side.
You see, that's no, but you see that's the whole thing, right? I mean, it's kind of like the dichotomy between good girl, bad girl, but like no, there's 100% that fiery, that like because first love was like that fiery love, right? For me, it's a bit like the light and the shadow of someone, where you have each and every individual has a bigger proportion of light or shadow, and this is the good girl, like you know, like the nice girl is like 90% light or 80% light or 70% light and maybe 30, 20, 10% of shadow, right? And then the feisty girl is about 90, 80%, 70% of shadow, right? So yourself, right? You're like, in a way to balance yourself, it's almost like it really depends upon your shadow and a bit like the yin and the yang. And then what's interesting is when I had the light girl after the first love, I noticed that the second love was the fiery again. Every time that I had love was always a fiery, but I still, in a way, had the love for the first light girl, right? But it was different, right? But then because I'm French, I'm passionate, you know. That's what really resonated with me. But I understand that. You see, it's and I mean, bloody hell, this I'm gonna get in trouble for this, but I'll say it anyway. The best way to mix the both is have the nice girl at home and the fiery girl as a mistress. Sorted. Right? Try not to have them to know one another. because it's not good. But then, I'm French, and apparently I had one girl say, like, to her father, she was like, she said to her father, "I'm dating this Frenchman, right?" And you know what the father said? He said, "Beware of Frenchmen. They always have mistresses." And then the girl comes back to me and say, "Do you have a mistress?" And I'm asking, "Well, what are you asking me this for?" So, well, because I told my dad that, like, she wanted to invite me to see the parents and all this. I told my dad that, about those French guys, and this French guy I met on the streets, and I literally met on the streets, not like the metaphorical streets. And he told me about you always having mistresses. So do you have one? Oh, no, of course not. I did. She was my mistress, but dad always knows better. But
I was
that was
wondering that was going to be the punchline. You are the mistress.
babe. All right, babe. Of course not. You're not the mistress. You're my first one, So yeah, the thing is, that's been the best setup. But it's, keeping a double life is tough. It's tough. But that's, if you have your cake and eat it.
Yeah. And the more women, the more work, the more energy, uptake, maintenance, upkeep.
Upkeep. No, but this is it. Like, you don't know what it is to have too many women until basically you reach the end of your bandwidth. You think it's hot to have like a rotation of shit of chicks. It's not. Trust me. I mean, where I mean, without getting too personal, where are your heads at? I mean, at your stage of life right now, after all your experience.
So, I did for a long time, and the guys that I learned from would run relationships where essentially I call it one-sided monogamy, where the girl is monogamous to you, but you're not to her. And I maintained that for a long time. And it's interesting because even in the seduction community, guys are against that, or like that can't work, or even guys that I would meet, that I would go out with, that were my wingmen, who would meet girls that were seeing me. They'd be like, "Oh, she's only putting up with that because she's desperate or something." I'd be like, "This girl's not desperate. She's not desperate." And it just shatters guys' realities, because guys would meet your girlfriend that they know that she knows that you're taking other girls and she's not getting with other guys. And they'll be like, I don't believe it. Like, she treats you better than my girlfriend treats me. Like, what's going on?
And I'm
But
monogamous.
yeah, but what happens eventually is, especially as those relationships get to a certain point, it's like there's a social immune system where the society starts converging on it. And you kind of realize that without social support for the relationship setup, you have a lot of problems. Because people will start figuring out that they'll start figuring out what the nature of the relationship is, and then they start giving her unsolicited advice. And that's when people start telling her, that girl, that guy, he doesn't treat you right. You deserve so much better than him. Even though she's way happier with you than they are with their men, those women will still come to her. They will still be telling her, that's not right. You need to leave him. You need to whatever. And so she comes back home, and she's giving you all this drama, and you settle it, and she's happy again. And then she goes back out, and then the next day she's getting it, and the next time you see her again, it's all over again. And it keeps happening again and again. And at one point, I was trying to do a setup where I have a couple of girls living together with me, and we got pretty close to making it happen, and then it fell through at the last minute. But in retrospect, I was like, man, it would have been a disaster if I pulled it off, because I had some busybody neighbors at the time, and there was like an old lady living nearby me who was always coming over trying to talk to people, and I know she would have started saying all kinds of things as soon as I had both girls living together. I spent years talking about this with a couple other friends, that we wanted to do like some sort of like how can kings have harems, and kings of old, they've got these harems of all these women. Why shouldn't we be able to do that? I mean, we're all exceptional guys. We should be able to have that, right? So we're trying to figure it out, like, how can we, but the point I kept making was like, if we look at like really rich guys now, famous guys, successful guys, how come none of these guys have it? And if these guys, you would think that some of these guys would have it. And I know there's like a few social media guys online, they're like, I've got that. But when you look closer, it's like all kind of weird, or it's like chicks with personality disorders and all kinds of different things. Like, how can you have that with a normal chick? And ultimately, what I concluded was, and my buddies agreed with me, is like, if you don't have the social support there, you can't keep it running. If you look at every society where it is, it's either the king or the sultan or whatever, he's got his harem, but it's guarded by a bunch of eunuchs. The guy's had his balls chopped off, so he can't sleep with the woman that he's guarding. Or it's a society that really supports it. In the U.S., there's a breakaway set of the Fundamentalist Church of Latter-day Saints, where they outlawed polygyny. The man can't take multiple wives, but this breakaway sect does, and the way they do it is when the young boys get old enough, they kick out most of the boys, so there's only a few boys and a lot more girls. And then each of the boys takes a bunch of wives. And the U.S. government raided them like 10 years ago and like took all the women away because they thought they were saving the women from this terrible situation. And it turns out that they didn't have internet, they didn't have TV, no movies, no outside books. So they weren't exposed to the broader U.S. culture at all. And they just had their own internal culture. And all the women there were like, this is what we like. We like having our co-wives. They're like our sisters. Please just let us go back to our lives. We just want to go back to, because that was their culture that they had.
Sorry, what was the name of that? I don't know,
the
called sect, or was it called a sect? I mean, was it?
It's called I believe it's called the Fundamentalist Church of Latter-day Saints.
I think I think maybe I've seen one of the speakers. It was a fundamentalist church of Latter-day, Latter. Yeah, I found that. All right, the chat. All right, that seems like an interesting sect.
Yeah.
This is for a friend, by the way.
Sure.
So but it makes sense, because at the end of the day, it's about, like, that's what I said. Like, I made a post this morning, right? Hold on, let me just actually get to that post, because there's something that I want to say, right? Which is, so it is something that people think that there must be a silver bullet, making themselves only the single main variable as to why something happens with a girl. That's why they think maybe game is 100%, or maybe. And what you show here, right, about that social support, about this type of closed-end environment, is that for things to work long term, it's like, yeah, you can have as much masculine frame you want, but it's about what's her bringing, what has been, what is she being exposed to, how her friends like. Those are things you cannot control. If you start, at time t plus 25, and you expect her to change, like at 40, at 35, pretty much she's a known quantity. She has made her choice. She's going through a life direction. So there's so much you can do as a guy to kind of shift. And in a way, that explains the passport bro shit. But it's like, you can play optimally speaking game. But even though you do, you won't necessarily get the outcome you expect on that single event, because there's randomness. Life, is random. Girls and the outcomes are random on a single unit basis. What other factors comes into play? You have environment, you have the other person's agency. They do have agency, even though they don't want to take into consideration it, and they don't want to respect it. When consequences, they have, there's also timing. You have also both people's opportunity cost in assessing the other person SMV or value they have. And on top of that, they have their respective agenda. So when you think about it all, right, you're like, okay, well, there's so much that I can do. I'll do what within the controllables, but the non-controllables, I have to be fine with it. What the fundamentalist church of Latter-day Saints did, we're going to create our environment so as to be able to create that reality of this polygamic society. And technically, that's what you're saying, is we can try to set up a system, but only within the structures that allows it. And within the current sort of structures, unless you pick from girls from that certain environment, it is always doomed to fail. Did I get that right?
Yeah, because you're one man fighting against the greater society. One man fighting against millions of people, essentially, for influence. And you have a lot more influence with her than any individual person outside of the relationship does. But you're still one man fighting against millions of people.
Actually, have you seen the tweet that went viral this week with my exchange with that girl telling me about the girls group chat?
I think I saw part of it, but I didn't see the whole thread.
All right, so I'll sum it up. But this basically tells you everything you need to know. I mean, I call the girls group chat, whether it's on WhatsApp, whether it is, like the little brunchy meeting on the Sunday, I call it the board of bitches. All right. So what does a board of bitches do? So this girl, right? 40-year-old living in Midwest US, right? She started dating this guy, right? He went on a coffee date with her. So she tells that to the friends, and the friends, like, one is 38, one is 42, one is 46. And she said, I can't believe you went on the coffee date with him. You're dumb. A 40-year-old plus established man would never take a girl on a coffee date unless he's a brokey. But she went in on that coffee date regardless of their opinion. Right? Well, she said, well, look, if I was a guy, I would want to know if I'm dealing with a real life gremlin. So she went on a date and everything. So the girl started shitting on her. And then they get on well. They liked each other. Apparently, he was doing very well. VP at a multinational level. Then next day, they go to a wine bar and he buys this expensive wine, like $170. She doesn't say anything. She just kind of took note when he mentioned the stuff and was looking at the menu, right? Everything goes well. Third date, they go onto this comedy club, which she recommended and which she paid for the ticket. The girl starts saying, "Come bear, I can't even imagine that you bought the ticket." And they were like, I hope he offered to reimburse you. No, because I recommended it. I wouldn't, right? Fourth date, he offered her to cook and food at his place and just have time. They didn't have sex. Because originally what they thought is, he rented an Airbnb, he's married. All the girls group chat, like literally. He's bullshitting you. We're trying to protect you. We're trying to protect you. Anyway, happens to be that those two of the girls work in real estate. I mean, if you're above 40 as a real estate and you're childless and you're not married, does it mean that basically you're a hoe that basically repented herself and trying to find another way? I mean, that never missed, by the way. I've noticed that. Anyway, and then fifth date, they have sex, or they go to a restaurant, whatever. Sixth date, they go to a Michelin star restaurant. But in between, what the girls did, once she gave first name, last name, they went to check the location of, see if he owns any property in that area with his last name. They found two properties close to $1 million each. They never asked anymore how's the date going because they wanted to be proven right. And they were proven wrong. And what it shows is, as a guy, never underestimate the impact of the girl's friends, especially if they're single, because they'll be working against you. Sorry, it was a bit long-winded, but any interesting stories like that yourself?
Yeah, I've seen it countless times with girls. And the thing is that there's an interesting, was it a study or where did I see it? Years and years ago. It always put it in perspective for me. But it was basically like a girl will choose a different man for herself than she would choose for her friends. For herself, she wants the guy who's fun and exciting or whatever, but for her friends, she wants the guy who's going to be safe. So there's always this tension between what people are recommending for their friends. And I think to a certain extent, guys will also do it. I've had this thing with guys as well. I'll see a guy friend who's with a girl. I'm like, dude, be careful. That girl's all wrong for you. He's like, well, shows what you know. She's great. And then she ends up ruining his life or whatever. But, girls will be telling guys that they're taking the cautious note. They're like, be careful with that guy, make sure that he's really going to invest in you. Meanwhile, the girl herself is focusing on, she's also evaluating him on those things, but she's evaluating him on other stuff too. Like, is he exciting to her? And the friends don't generally care about that unless they're like going out friends and they're hooking up or whatever, and they're picking a guy for the night, in which case they're like, yeah, he's fun, go with him. But if it's a dating scenario where she's looking at going on multiple dates with the guy, then that's boyfriend husband material. Does he meet the criteria? So all the women will be picking or pecking at him very hard, trying to see, he doesn't match up, like, he should be doing this, he should be doing that. You got the whole gallery of hens that are all telling her what to be doing. And so they have an influence and they can cause her to be more cautious, but it depends on the girl. Some women are much more influenced by that than others. Some women will just tell them, get out of here. Some women will start having doubts and be like, oh, maybe you're right, maybe I should, whatever. And then they show up much more timid or apprehensive. Yeah. Just depends on the chick. Depends on her relationship with the women too. Is it someone? Are they people that she knows and trusts a lot, or are they just some group where she only semi knows them? What's the
Yeah,
connection?
is she influenceable? But you know what's interesting here is you say like, and that's the whole thing. Going back to our previous conversation, is when she sees you as husband or boyfriend material, you paying more to get less, in the sense that you don't even get the sex and you get all the bullshit vetting and benchmarking, etc. Especially when she's giving it to everyone else before, and on the cheap. And that's also another thing which I think it's. I want to have your opinion on this, right? Which is this idea, and it goes back to what you were saying about the good girls, the nice girls, and the bad girl, right? Well, not the bad girl, but the fiery, feisty girl. Girls go through a spectrum. At one point they're that, at one point they're that, but whatever is displayed to you at that point in time is not necessarily who she truly was in the past. Therefore, this idea that you find yourself with a girl that, you know what, I'm going to be different with her because she's different, she's special. Technically, you just met her at a different stage of her life where she'll portray a different face. So therefore, you have to always work under the basis that they're all the same, that you treat them all the same, and that you get more or less the same result. Because the moment that you start to think her differently, you start to pedestalize her, you start to change the way you act and get different results. And what happens is the moment that she corners you as boyfriend and husband material, and that goes back to what you were saying earlier, which is find a way to be seen as the lover, whilst not completely closing the boyfriend zone. Because if you can go a bit more on that.
Yeah, sure. The thing to keep in mind, we were talking about calibrating yourself to the girl. Well, girls will calibrate themselves to you based on what they think you're looking for or what they think you're available for. So if you're going to present yourself as someone who might potentially be open to being a boyfriend, then she's going to calibrate herself to that and present herself as the perfect potential girlfriend. So if you're looking to hook up with a girl quickly, you don't want her doing that. You want her to calibrate herself to you as this fun, sexy fling. And even if you do want her as a girlfriend, I still recommend you do that because you want things to move quickly with her. There are a couple of different reasons why. So let's say you meet this girl and you think that this girl is your future wife. You're like, this girl, from everything I can tell about her, she's amazing. You still want to get her in bed as quickly as possible, and here's why. The first reason is if you don't, life can intervene. You don't know what else is going on in her life. You don't know what else might happen. You don't know if she might be talking to another guy. You can be talking to a girl. Maybe you think this girl's amazing. Maybe she's got another guy she's been talking to longer than you. You don't know about him. She didn't tell you about him. Maybe he's further along than you are. If you can get her in bed real quick, you can do the end run around him, lock her down, and now she's going to call it off with that guy. But if you're moving too slow, he might get her before you do, and then you're getting the message about how, oh, sorry, I'm seeing someone right now, and you're out of the running, and you're probably not going to want to go back to her later because she picked another guy over you. But another reason why is she can just have life intervene just more generally. Things are going great between the two of you. Maybe you've gone on a couple of dates. You got this great vibe, and all of a sudden something happens. Work is just piled on top of her. She's got pulled onto some business trip. She's going to be away for 2 weeks. She's got a family crisis happening. One of her parents got really sick, and now she's not in a dating mindset at all. She's pulled away from you for weeks or a month, and by the time she comes back, her head's not in the same space. Who knows? You may not get together at all. But the other reason why you want to move quicker with her is because you're going to get to find out a lot more stuff, a lot more honestly about her. When you move slower, she puts you into that boyfriend frame, and then she tries to be much more careful with her presentation. If you are the sexy throwaway lover, then she says, well, there's not really a future with him. It's not going to turn into anything with him. So I can just be honest with him. I'll just tell him the truth. And that's how you find out the stuff that you want to find out about her. For a long-term relationship, all the partner count, past history, the stuff is very important because the past history is what gives you clues to how she's going to behave in the future and what your likely future is with her. And if she is trying to present herself as the perfect girlfriend, a lot of times she's going to try to suppress or polish over anything murky in her past that might dissuade you from wanting to keep her around. Whereas if she doesn't view you as the potential boyfriend, she won't do that. Not necessarily as much. So do that. And then of course, the other wrinkle is you don't want to be such the throwaway bad boy that she sees no future with you at all. So you start sprinkling in more boyfriend value, especially after you sleep with her. You can have a nice breakfast with her the next day. You start talking about your promising job or whatever. So she kind of goes like, oh, I thought this was just a throwaway guy, but actually this guy, maybe there could be something here. And then it starts to sprout in her mind.
So let me just sum it up, right? The reason as to why you want to do that, right? Life can come at you, right? Gets you to actually be more honest with you as to what's her background, what's her past. Because even though the past is not necessarily the future, it does certainly rhyme. And the first one you said was also as a gauge to see her interest level for you, or what was it? About the first one.
Not necessarily interest level, but well, you're gauging her. I guess you can kind of say interest level, but that's her. Yeah, I would say that's fair in terms of her level of sexual attraction to you, which I think is very important for a long-term relationship. Because you see plenty of guys that are doing the dead bedroom thing where they've got a girl that, maybe she was with them because he was the reasonable choice or whatever, but she's not very attracted to him. And I, for one, would much rather be in a relationship that has a healthy sex life going on for as long as the relationship is there, and not be dealing with like, oh, what am I doing with this girl? Like, we built this relationship together and now she doesn't want to have sex. It doesn't sound like a good thing to me. So I think it's important to have that towards the front.
But it was not exactly what you said. But can you remind me what you said?
So I said other guys can pop in.
That's
That's the other one.
Other guys can pop in. Yeah, that's
You
the thing.
think you're the only guy,
but you know what? If you're into football, guys, yesterday I was at a friend's, right, and I was watching the game, Manchester City against Manchester United. Manchester City was winning 1-0 from, let's say, the 20-something minutes, if I'm not mistaken, until the 85th minute. A football game, or soccer, as in US, lasts 90 minutes plus extra time. And what happened? United was playing shit. It was playing shit most of the game. Well, not most of the game. Funnily enough, I bet on them at 5.4, which is about 5-1, right? Or 4-1. Anyway. And they scored 85th, 87th minute 2-1. Football generally has an average number of goals per game of about 2.x goals, depending upon the league, depending upon the team, etc. And what it showed is exactly this. They did a smash and grab, literally and metaphorically, in the sense that you think that you were running ahead all that time because you were just passing the ball along, playing it cool to school, everything. And then you have this guy coming in the background, backdooring you, literally and metaphorically as well. And you find yourself with very little time to play in order to kind of make up for the thing, and then you get fucked. But really, and I think all the points you mentioned is so true, because also on the second point, something I found.
I'll tell you a story real quick to highlight it.
Go ahead.
One of my girlfriends, when I met her, so before I met her, she had a couple different guys that were vying for her. One guy would take her out shopping, and he was telling her, they were both guys that she knew from work. She was working at a bank, and this one guy was telling her, you need to improve your wardrobe because she wasn't super fashionable, and he was like, I'm going to take you shopping and help you get better clothes. Actually, when I met her, she was dressed super fashionably because this guy had taken her out to go shopping and helped her buy all this stuff. And he was just going to the mall with her a bunch and waiting around for her. But she had this other guy that she had really liked a lot more, who was from another city, and he was kind of suave and smooth, and he took her out and he was giving her all this career advice, like, if you want to move up, you gotta be more aggressive in asking for what you want, or building networks and relationships. And she was thankful for the advice. He took her out to a bar, and they had a really nice conversation. It started snowing outside, and she said, it was kind of magical, and he touched her hair, and she felt like it was this magical romantic moment. And then he didn't push it any farther than that. And then maybe a week later, she randomly met me waiting for the train. Like, I saw this girl, and I was getting some signals from her that she wanted to talk to me. So I went over and talked to her right away, met her the next day for coffee, took her back to my place, shagged her a couple more times. And I was like, I really like this girl. And then, like, right away, I was really excited about her. And I was even like, oh, this girl is really hot. Who knows if she's going to go for it in the first date, but I'm going to try anyway. If you don't try, you won't find out. And turns out she did. And these guys that were courting her were totally confused about what happened and why she fell off, because they thought, especially the guy that had the romantic night with the snow falling outside, he thought he had it on lock and that they were getting really close. And then all of a sudden, she just wasn't interested in going out on hanging out with them anymore.
And
Because
you thought you had it on
popped
lock?
up and picked the girl off.
he got it unlocked, but you pop, lock, and drop it. That's what you did.
Yeah. Move fast, quicker before the other guys can.
That's it. That's it. No, but this is it. It's like Mario Kart, right? You think like you're ahead, and then you get one of those things. Boom! Get out of the way. I'm winning the race.
I've had other ones. I had one where I met a girl on the street and started talking to her. She seemed to be like really interested, and I was supposed to meet her 2 days later, and I was super, super busy, and I was working like 14 hours a day, and I told her, I'm sorry, I can't meet today. Let's postpone to next week. And then I contacted her, and it took me like a week to contact her. When I finally did, she met up with me and went out, but she started talking to me, and she's like, I brought her back to my apartment. I went to kiss her, and she's like, I have to tell you something. I'm seeing someone now. I said, really? When did that happen? And she's like, well, I just started seeing him on Monday. She said, I met him the same day that I met you, right after I met you. He invited me out to the beach, and we went to the beach on Monday, from like Monday to Wednesday. And she's like, I really want to see if this can work. And I was like, that's great. I'm the one that got hen run around. And, different guys have different approaches. And I'm kind of like, I respect like a budding new relationship. And I wasn't going to be there very long. I was like, wow, she's got something that she thinks might work out. I'll back off. Threw her back out there. But I was like, it happened to me. I'm the one usually doing it to other people.
I'll tell you something, other guys, right? Like, I found this, and it goes back to life can happen and everything. You were talking about business trips or whatnot. Like this, like these days, dating apps to me is just content material, right? So it's like, I play along to see just until what I can get. And the amount of girls that are about to go on a trip, every time I'm about, let's just meet, oh yeah, I'm going to this place at this time. And it's like, from the moment that you text her, that you have like that good vibe going on and everything, to the moment that you actually get to meet her, she's abroad. It's like it kills the momentum. Always, always, always. These days, it's like, outside of the dopamine fried, social head that you got in girls, like they're always fucking faffing about traveling for God knows what, God knows where, for whatever purpose, right? And that's another thing that you have to factor in. So it's like, how can you be relevant? Because literally, girls are doing everything to fuck up a potential mating possibility. This is whether it is on a date, whether it is in the infrastructure or the logistics of the setup. Actually, 2 questions I've got for you. Generally, that's for the audience. Generally, how do you address those 2 type of, let's say, pushback they'll give you? Say, for example, you want to meet her somewhere, and she tell you, let's meet halfway. What do you respond?
Well, say I'm suggesting let's meet this place. She says let's meet halfway there. Depends where she's proposing. And if it's a lot of times, the way I'll do it is I'll say, how about we meet the place that I'm proposing this time and we can go there next time. That's what I'll do. So then you're being a little bit gracious and seeing if she'll go for it. If I really like the girl, sometimes I might say, how about this other place that's halfway between those 2 places?
Mm-hmm.
Then then you're giving her a bit of a compromise. But for me, especially at this point, a lot of the importance is on how convenient is the date for me. Because past a certain point, I find that it's very easy to get women to come out to places that are convenient for you. And if it's not very convenient for you, you kind of don't want to be bothered by going to some places too far. And if it doesn't go great, then you're going to be annoyed. You're like, I want to come all the way out here. So if there's some place that I'm comfortable going.
But don't you find interesting that girls also function the same now? They be like, although the other one paying for the date, they want to tell you exactly where to go, even though where you go is halfway, technically 50-50. You have no fucking clue of what's a good place around because it's not where you live. And it's like, you have just to make sure that the girls, because at the end of the day, girls feel that if you do this, it's kind of like, they feel they're being bossed around a lot of time, and they don't like that, which is obviously telling me that they're very masculine because they don't want to let be dead. But it's very interesting insight what you said on basically either fast forwarding to the next time or finding a place midway between her suggestion and your suggestion. The other one is
well, before we go to the next one, I'll add one little bit, because the thing that I have found is that if she's proposing someplace else, whatever the reason, she's not as into you as the girl that's just going to come right to where it is. So already that's a somewhat less promising indicator. So she's already kind of telling you there's a better than average chance that this date isn't going to go where you want it to go. So you're already like,
Me,
I'm kind of getting some bad signs here. So let's see if we can still
the
make it
medium
better.
is the message, 100%. And also another thing is a lot of time it is very much agenda driven because, you know, again, as our common friend says, it's like if she's creating pushbacks and everything, it's not always necessary to do about you, but also about her agenda of the time. I'm not into hookups, I'm not into this, because most likely either she's learning from social media to not go around the guy's place, not necessarily place as in his premises per se, but places as in a bar close to his, but go somewhere that is neutral. That's what they're being told a lot. Like, or sometimes they'll be like 007 was telling me that now in the LA Times, they're being told by the LA Times, go for coffee dates, not drinks, because then it's more likely to lead to something casual if you want something serious. You see what I'm saying? It's can be not necessarily about you per se, but also per the agendas that she has as a way to buffer herself. Yeah, go ahead. You want to add on to it?
Just agreeing with your points.
And the other thing, which is I want to ask you, is what do you usually do in order to transition? And if you do one venue or two venues before you transition to your place, or do you go straight from one venue to your place? And does coffee dates or drinks or dinner, what's your stance on that?
I tend to recommend a couple of different kinds of date templates based on what kind of date you're going for. So if you have a girl that you have met very briefly and the connection doesn't seem to be very, very strong, a lot of times I will do and will recommend guys do a quick, what I call an informational date, where you're just meeting her up for something light and quick, where you're just getting to know her so that it's super low pressure. Like, we're going to meet 45 minutes for coffee in the middle of the day. Like, when she's got a lunch break, you're going to meet, grab coffees together, you're going to grab lunch real quick, talk for 45 minutes, and then send her on her way. That way she's coming, she doesn't have too much pressure on her to, you know, maybe this has to go somewhere. And this is especially good if you are good at building attraction, but you didn't get a good chance to originally for whatever reason. Maybe it's like a better online situation, or you met her very quickly on the street and it was like a 2-minute conversation and you're off and there's not much of a vibe over text. She doesn't seem very eager. So that one would be one where you just meet very quickly and chat. And then if it ends up going really well and she doesn't have to be somewhere, then you can extend it and either do a bounce to another venue or end up pulling her back if the vibe's really good. But the other one is what I call a structured date, which is where you structure it out. And it can be one where you're just at a single venue, but even when you're doing it that way, I recommend meeting her outside the venue first. Like, some guys will do like meet at this cafe and the guy's already seated or she's already seated. But there's a mental effect where when people are in different places with you, they form more memories and it feels like they know you longer. Because, you know, if you've ever, I'm sure you've had this experience where you're talking to someone and you have like a really long conversation, but you've been in the same place the entire time. And when the conversation ends, like 2 hours later or whatever, you depart and you look back, it's almost dreamlike. You're like, it was a long conversation, but in another way, it doesn't feel that long. It feels like we were just kind of had this long conversation. We're just in this one place and then we left. And it doesn't feel like you know that person so substantially, even if you connected really well. Whereas if you meet outside the cafe, you're talking, walking together, then you get to the cafe, you sit down, and you're talking in the cafe, and then later you get up, you walk out of the cafe, and you either go to the next venue or go to your place. Then there is this series of different places that you've been, and it's called is the time bridge, is when you're moving from one place to another. So it depends on what kind of date the girl needs. The way that I break it down in my one date system, which is my flagship course, is that you have different girls that are looking for different things. And essentially, there are 3 things that you can break it down to, and these are based on my experience, but also based on a huge amount of research and attraction that psychologists have done. And the first of these is connection, where basically a girl is looking for a guy that she feels is very similar to her, has similar underlying values. Another one is a girl who's looking for arousal. She wants to be turned on and excited. And the third one is the girl who is already kind of ready to go. She just needs a guy that's going to take the lead with her. So she's the girl that just needs to comply. And every girl is looking for all 3 of these things. She needs similarity, arousal, but she needs them in different combinations, and she's usually seeking one more than the other. So typically, if she's looking for similarity, you can just take her to a coffee date or a dive bar and just have a good conversation with her. And you may not need any other venues. You can just seed the pool. And once she feels connected enough to you, if you've also done some arousal and compliance as well, you can just pull her back to your place. either to drink wine or have hot chocolates or whatever you want to do with her. If she's arousal, a lot of time you're going to be better off having a date where you're taking her to a series of different places where you're doing some fun and stimulating things because she needs to get the stimulation up. And one of the interesting things with the way that arousal works in the brain. So typically when we're talking about arousal and seduction, we talk about like sexual arousal. But one of the most fascinating things, so I'm sure you've seen this before, like guys will take women to watch horror movies, or guys will take the girl on the motorcycle, and it's like, why do guys do that? Girls find it exciting. How does it translate?
Mm-hmm.
Well, the research on arousal finds that arousal is undifferentiated in the brain. So whether she is aroused by a creepy guy who's staring at her, a sexy
Mm-hmm.
guy who's touching her, a lion that's about to jump on her, riding on the back of the motorcycle, riding in a roller coaster, whatever it is, it's the same basic emotion in the brain.
Mm-hmm.
And the only way she could figure out what is causing the arousal is when she stops and looks around and figures out what's causing it. So when you take her to watch the horror movie and the horror movie scares her, she feels arousal, but then she looks and you've got your arm around her and you're really close with her, and she's like, oh, that must be why I'm aroused. It's because I'm with this sexy guy who's really close to me. She rides the motorcycle. She's scared by the motorcycle, but she's got her arms wrapped around you, and she's like, oh, I'm aroused by this guy. So the arousal transfers onto you. So that's what you're doing with an arousal date, where you're bouncing her to these different places. You're doing some stimulating things. Like when I lived by the beach, one that I used to like to do was to take girls. First, we started a cafe so we can do a little connection, and then we'll start walking around, walk down on the boardwalk, walk onto the beach. I'll tell girls to wear their bathing suit, and then I'll kind of test them with it a little bit. And I'll be like, ever been thrown into the ocean? What would happen if somebody threw you into the ocean? And
Mm-hmm.
unless they're like really opposed to it, if they're like, oh no, that would be, then I'll scoop them up in my arms and throw them into the ocean. And they're laughing, yelling. But it's this big spike of arousal. And then, you put your arm around them, you take them, you go get some ice cream, you take them back to your place afterwards. So you're doing stuff that is spiking arousal on the date, where you just structure it with these different things. And other things that you can do like that are taking her to an arcade, you're playing skee ball, air hockey. So she's doing something, she's in motion, you could be teasing her, flirting with her. But you structure it in a way that you're creating the experience that she needs. And then with the girls that are already ready to go, you can just do shorter dates with them. So you can just need the cafe or the dive bar date. Sometimes you can just invite them straight back to your place if they're open for it. If you're pinging them as you go. I've had some girls. So once I had a girl that she had flaked on the first date because she couldn't find the location, and at first I thought, oh, she's just ghosting me. She stopped replying. And then she apologized much later, and she's like, I'm sorry, I've been driving around, I can't find it. And I was like, that's okay. But I told her my normal response when girls flake is, next time you're gonna have to make it up to me. So she said okay. And the next time she showed up, she picked me up in her car. She had like a big box of chocolates she brought with me, and it was really cold, and we were supposed to go to a cafe. And she was like, so do you want to go to a cafe or do you want to go to your place? And I was like, go to my place. She's like, okay. Parked outside my place. We went right up, and 10 minutes later, I was shagging her. And so it's like, if she's ready to go, then it's just leading it forward. And that was a girl that I met in a nightclub, and I talked to her for like an hour in the club first. And her friend was trying to get her to go with me, and she was resistant. And her friend was like, oh, she just hasn't had the experience yet, and I'm trying to get her to open up more. So it just depends on.
Well, yeah, for once a friend's actually playing for you. Great.
Yeah.
It reminds me of a time when I was in this Chelsea club. I mean, I remember I managed to get into the Chelsea club. Like, Chelsea is like one of the posh areas in London. Like, and I got it. I managed to get in as a single man, despite the bouncers, right? Crazy shit. Like, managed to basically talk to this girl on the streets. She was blonde. She was like, oh yeah, I love you, blah, blah. Get in there. She get, like I get into the VIP with her. For some reason, she managed to get into the VIP. I managed to get in the VIP. I'm such a leech sometimes. Anyway, and once I get in there, for some reason, I lose her. Then I met those two girls. Really, like, I'm just thinking, like, they're ready. They're down. Like, one of them is DTF. I'm like, all right, good, happy days. I'm going in there. The other one is coming along. I'm like, and she's like, do you want to come with us too? I'm just thinking, holy happy days. I'm going to get a threesome, and I didn't pay for shit. Great shit. But they had another friend who was supposed to get with another guy. And for some reason, we're supposed to go, the three of us, is me and that guy. And then she lost that guy in the club. So that third friend basically fucked it all up. And so, oh, actually, I don't think she should come and everything, because basically she was being party poo-pooing the whole thing. Guys, when you have that girl that is helping the other, that slutty girl that helping the other friend, seriously, give her a tip. I'm telling you, not the tip of your dick, but give her a good tip, because it's happening rare, too rare to be mentioned. But anyway, but that's a very interesting. So let me just sum up the three factors, right? So it's like arousal, connection. Sorry.
So yeah, we got to sum all that up. I just covered a bunch of ground.
Arousal, connection, and what was the last one you said? Compliance. Yeah, that's it. CAC, like the CAC 40 in the meaning, like which is
the connection. Connection I call similarity, based on I was calling it connection originally, but all the psychological research is on attitude similarity, which is
yeah. But the thing is, with similarities, it's almost like a false friend. I'm saying, because I find that a lot of guys basically look for common points because they think similarities as a way to build rapport. But a lot of time when you try to see too much similarities, are in the oven, and you're not looking at creating dissension, then all of what you're trying to do is basically trying too hard to kind of fit with her rather than actually let it flow, and it actually blows back against them. That's why I'm like, commonalities are actually not as good as you think they are. But the way you describe similarities is different.
Yeah, the superficial commonalities are really bad when guys are focusing on music, taste in movies, and things like that. It's super superficial, and guys think they're building connections, and they're not. There's risk with any of the kinds of approaches. If you focus too much on connection, even if you're building deep connection, if you're not building arousal and you're not building compliance, then you're basically just a really great friend. You're like, I feel so connected to him, but I'm not turned on at all, and I'm not invested. So you go in the friend zone. But the other risk is the guys that will build. So some guys get really good at ramping up arousal really high, but they don't build connections with the girl. And basically what you're doing is, I kind of think of it as floors and ceilings. Like the ceiling is how high you can build up arousal before she hits a point where she's like, oh, what's going on? I'm getting too turned on. I need to check myself. Mm-hmm. And the floor is how far she can fall emotionally if she falls down from that trough. And the more connected to you she feels, the higher the floor is, so she doesn't fall as far. But if you don't build a connection, the floor is down really low. So guys will build up this arousal that's really high. It's up to this peak, but they didn't build the basic connection. And then as soon as something pops that bubble, it just disappears.
And the
She's really, really turned on.
And the compliance is kind of like the ladder of yes, kind of like getting her to move from one place to the next, basically. Is that right?
Yeah. She's connected to you, she's aroused, but if she hasn't been investing in you, and suddenly you ask her to do something big, it's like, you want somebody to do something big with him? It's this big decision. Whereas if you've been leading her, she agreed to this little thing, and that little thing, that little thing. Now she's in this habit of following you, which I think that's the one that is consistently the most alien for most guys, because most guys, at least most guys that need to learn seduction, are not in the habit of continually asking people to do things and leading them. Mm-hmm. There's some guys that are that way. Those guys aren't usually learning seduction because they're already out leading chicks to do whatever they want.
Yeah, no, it's very interesting, because for me it's quite funny, because I think we kind of like saying about the same thing but framing it with different terminology. For me, it's like attraction / arousal for you, and comfort, which is like connection, where it's like if you put too much attraction, I'd say lead with attraction, buffer it with comfort in a way so that it doesn't get too high, so that the risk of failure becomes too steep for her to kind of like not follow the compliance. It's kind of like that gel between the 2 and 3.
Yeah, that's the way Mystery Method taught it, which RSD was influenced heavily by Mystery Method. It starts with attraction, and then it goes to comfort. For some reason, I can't remember the third part. It's the method. The way I typically teach it for guys is you're pinging her to see what she's receptive to most, and you start with pinging her on compliance, because if she'll comply with you right away, if she'll just follow you wherever you go, you don't really need to worry about the other stuff. You just keep leading her forward until she gets back to the bedroom. But if she's a little resistant to compliance, then you test her with some arousal, some tease, flirt, touch. If she's really responsive to that, then just ramp up her arousal more, build some connection, compliance, and then get her out of there. And if she's not as responsive to that, then you go to building similarity first. But you have to be throwing in the arousal and the compliance. But different girls are looking for different things, and then you match to what they're looking for.
Yeah, and that's something that guys need to understand. You can't bloody get them all to have sex with you first date whatsoever. It's like sometimes it'll happen, sometimes it won't. And sometimes because you fuck up, But a lot of times it's because you didn't screen well, or she was just not in the right place, right mind, even though you did. Simple. So, and the last bit I wanted to ask you is, how do you find, I mean, however you want, how much information you want to put out on that, but how do you normally seed the pool?
How do you seed the pool?
Yeah.
Well, whatever it is that you want to use to seed, I suggest you seed it multiple times throughout the day, long before the actual pool. Just float it out there what you want to do. So a lot of times for me, I'll just use the very basic one. Either if I'm meeting her at night, I'll do a nightcap, or if I'm meeting her during the day. Do you know the term nightcap?
No, I don't, but please let me, I'm always a client of new terms.
Yeah, so nightcap is a drink that you have at the end of the night. It's cap at the end of the night.
Mm-hmm.
So your nightcap, your final drink. And so with girls, like if we have dive bar date or whatever, or if it's not a date, if we just met at the nightclub or what have you, or at a party, then we're talking about, later we can get a nightcap. Just seeding that concept of the nightcap into her head so that the concept becomes familiar and she's already comfortable with it. And if you have, so I had a friend that had a half bar at his house and he had tons of different alcohol. And so I kind of learned that from him. And I started storing different kinds of alcohol at home. And I got like a shaker. You can shake up mixed drinks, learn to mix different drinks. So you can talk about that with girls and you say, it's cool. I took this, I took a bartending class, and I took this bartending class, learned how to make different drinks. Here, and I'll pull up the app on my phone. Here's this app. It shows you how to make these different drinks. I got pretty good at it. Got a bunch of the ingredients at home. It's a lot of fun. So you're seeding that idea of like, I've got this at home. It's a fun experience. I can make all kinds of different drinks. You can try some drink you've never had before. And you're not telling her you're going to take her there. You're just letting her know that it's there. And so once she's ready for the pool, she's already been familiarized with this idea that you've got all this stuff at home, and she's familiarized with the idea of the nightcap, and she's kind of giving you that look like, I'm ready to go. You're like, hey, how about we go grab that nightcap? Mm-hmm. And a lot of times she's just going to be like, okay. Or she might give you some resistance. So I had one girl once who I said, let's go get a nightcap. And she just, and this was a more experienced girl, so right away she's like, where, your place? And I said, yeah. And she said, why can't we just get a nightcap here? We're at a bar. And I said, when I think of a nightcap, I think of a more relaxing environment where there aren't so many interruptions and other people around, the loud noises, where you can just really settle into the night and close off the night in a calm and tranquil environment where it's just you and just the people that you want to be with. And she was like, that's a really good answer. Let's go. And so we took off.
Like, see, you're too noble. When I hear that bullshit, it's like, I'm just like, what are you afraid of, bitch? I'm just like, we all know what it's about. Like, get the fuck,
Uh-huh.
But it is the right way, kind of thing. It's like, and on top of that, you say that in your way, like, like very composed, very collected, very just like.
No, it's like a seduction. That's part of the fun of it. Seducing your it.
You see that's like when I feel like I have to sell it, type of like, just to verbally express like this, I'm just like, So like, even like the thing is, yeah, go ahead.
I think part of it, I had a sales job for about 5 years. I was a tire salesman, so I'm used to dealing with all these objections. People go, oh, why should I get that? Why should I get that? I'm like, one of the first things I learned in sales was I had a really good boss. He was a great mentor, and he said, you want to get objections because as soon as you get the objection, now you know what the obstacle is. Now you know what you need to sell. The big problem is when the person won't tell you what the objection is, when they're just like, oh, I don't know, and you can't get the objection out. So you got to keep pushing until you get the objection. As soon as you get that, then you can close them. So as soon as I'm getting,
but then hold on. But there's objection and objection. Hold on, because I did 5 years in sales. I know my shit too.
Okay.
Sometimes
not telling you anything you don't know. Yeah,
sometimes they'll give you bullshit objection. So it's like you have few layers of what you need to ask them for questions.
Yeah, you got to be able to tell.
Exactly. So just adding on top of it, but yeah, it's kind of like it gives you the agenda. So you're like, but you just want to be told a nice little story so that she just feels she's not a whore or she's not a slut. Oh,
precisely.
It's just happened. Like that's it. But like when you've done that so many times, you're like, really? Like, come on. Like, can you not be an NPC? Like, please, But anyway, no. But I think those are great examples. Yeah, it's like, like that, when you're at that house near the beach or that flat or whatever near the beach, it's like, like you have that sound, in the evening with the water and everything. Just the way how you lined up that line, I was like, it's kind of like that background sound, that ambience, and the girl's like that.
Yeah, it's nice. It's romantic.
There you go. There you go, man. I think honestly that was like one of the best, if not the best part, the best special guest interview. I think there was a lot of value dropped on that one. But thank you very much for having joined the podcast. I think that's a great stuff. And please feel free to just say like say some of your resources that's online whatsoever. I mean, you mentioned your X account so that people can actually get to see your stuff.
Sure. Well, first off, thank you, French. It's very gracious of you, man. As far as where you can go if you want more of my stuff, if you're on x.com/girlschase, that's the account. Give us a follow. Try and put out more good stuff that's helpful and practical and it's good mindset. If you are a reader, you can check out girlschase.com. We got thousands of articles. Try to make sure that every piece has actionable advice and is giving new and interesting stuff compared to, other articles on there. We got tons of content though. So if you're not sure where to start out, you may want to take our diagnostic quiz, which is at girlschase.com/quiz. And that'll take you through a quick quiz that'll assess where you're at currently with girls. And then based on your score, it'll give you a free ebook that kind of eases you into our material. And you also sign up for email when you do that. We got a 7-day mini course where I've got some videos and some books and reports that'll give you a bunch of free stuff to get started with to familiarize you with more of my approach and the approach that we have on Girls Chase. And then if you liked the stuff that I had to say about dates and you're ready to just jump in right away and start using that process, you can go to girlschase.com/onedate. ONEDATE, one word. And I've got a video there for you about the one date system that I use, where we talked about that earlier, similarity, arousal, compliance. And that's my master class on dating. We've had 6,000 guys go through the course. They love it. A lot of them have said it's totally changed the way that they approach dating, and they use the SAC system now. They've switched from all kinds of different systems, and they all use that now when they go on their dates. They say it's much more efficient, powerful, allows them to attune their dates to the girl and much more regularly lay the girls that they're taking out. They get better relationships too. So you can check that out if you're ready to jump in. If you're not quite ready to jump in, then just check out the quiz first at girlschase.com/quiz. And that's my pitch. I could talk about a lot more things, but that'll get you the started with all the stuff we got.
Look, man, I mean, I'm definitely losing out on some potential customer getting you here. I'm telling you. But
yeah.
That's the least I can offer, and you give some very, very good value. And also, I will feel free to also send me your information on like all the links and everything, so that I can add it on the video description. Same thing for you guys. If you want to basically have personal coaching with me, you can basically go on the link at the bottom of the video, and you can have a free consultation call with me, just so that we can discuss about your situation, how we can address, and how I can help you with that. All right. On this, I'll let you go. It is a WG's podcast with Chase from Girls Chase, and we'll be there for another time.
Thanks, French. It's been a pleasure.